My own son dumped me at a nursing home on my 70th birthday while rain soaked my best silk blouse. He drove away thinking he had finally stolen my 4-bedroom house in the historic district. He did not know that hidden inside my wet orthopedic shoe was a lottery ticket worth $14 million. By the time he realized his mistake, I had already bought his debt, his future, and the very building he left me in to rot. Before I tell you how I made them pay for every single tear I refused to shed, please leave a comment telling us where you are watching from and subscribe to the Never Too Old channel. We are building a community of people who know that dignity does not have an expiration date. Now back to the story. I watched my vintage Louis Vuitton suitcase, a gift from my late husband 40 years ago, hit the curb with a wet, disrespectful thud. It landed square in a puddle of motor oil, splashing dirty water onto my ankles. That was the moment I knew. This was not a temporary stay for recovery as they had claimed. This was a disposal. "It is for the best, Mom," Brittany chirped from the passenger seat of the Mercedes I had helped them buy. She did not even step out into the rain. She just rolled down the window, flashing that practiced real estate agent smile that never reached her eyes. Dr. Evans said, "You need professional supervision. Your memory is slipping. We are just worried about your safety living alone in that big house." My memory was sharp as a tack. I remembered exactly how much money I had loaned them last month for David's gambling debt. I remembered the hungry look in Brittany's eyes when she asked where I kept the deed to my home. And I remembered changing my son's diapers, though looking at him now, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles and refusing to even look at me, I wondered why I had bothered. "David," I said. My voice was not loud, but it carried the weight of a head nurse administrator who had run an intensive care unit for 30 years. "Look at me." He did not turn. He stared straight ahead at the peeling paint of the Shady Pines Senior Living sign. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. "We have to go, Ma. Brittany has a showing at 2. A showing. That is what my life amounted to now, an inconvenience between appointments. I stood there 70 years old today, rain soaking through my clothes, realizing my birthday present was an eviction notice from my own life. They were not putting me here because I was sick. They were putting me here because I was in the way. The automatic doors of Shady Pines hissed open like a snake. The smell hit me instantly. Cheap pine cleaner trying to mask the scent of urine and boiled cabbage. I knew that smell. I knew the difference between a care facility and a warehouse for the unwanted. This was a warehouse. A large woman in scrubs that were 2 sizes too small marched toward me without a smile. "Esther Williams," she barked, checking a clipboard. "Your son signed the admission papers online. We do not have a private room, so you are in 4B, and we do not allow personal furniture." I looked back at the curb. The Mercedes was already peeling away tires, screeching slightly on the wet asphalt. My own son Bad not even said goodbye. He just drove off, leaving his mother with strangers on her 70th birthday. I did not cry. Crying is for people who have hope or people who are weak. I am neither. I just gripped the handle of my wet suitcase. They thought they were burying me here. They thought I was a senile old woman who would fade away quietly into the system. They were wrong. As I walked into that lobby, dragging my past behind me, I made a silent vow. I was not going to die in Shady Pines, but I was going to make sure they regretted the day they dropped me off here. The war had just begun. The woman who called herself Head Nurse Higgins had cold, dead eyes and hands that moved with the rough efficiency of a butcher handling low-grade meat. I sat in the hard plastic chair of the intake room, watching her violate the sanctity of my vintage suitcase. She did not fold my silk scarves. She wadded them up and tossed them into a clear plastic bin labeled contraband. "No personal items allowed. In the first 48 hours, she said, her voice like a cheese grater against my nerves. "It is policy. We need to ensure you are not bringing in pests or weapons." I straightened my spine. That silver comb was a gift from my husband on our 25th anniversary. It is sterling silver, not a weapon. She ignored me and reached for my toiletry bag. This was where the real battle began. I am 70 years old, but I have the skin of a woman 20 years younger because I take care of myself. I use specific creams. I take specific high-grade supplements that cost more than this woman likely made in a week. I watched her dump my prescriptions into a trash bag. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice rising for the first time. "Those are prescribed by my specialist. We use house formulary here," she said without looking up. She placed a small paper cup on the table. Inside were 3 white, chalky pills that looked like they had been swept up from a factory floor. Generic statins and a sedative. The cheapest possible alternatives to keep the inmates quiet and the costs low. I recognized the shape and the markings immediately. 30 years of running a hospital floor does not leave you just because you retire. "I am not taking those," I said, standing up. "That is a generic sedative that interacts poorly with blood pressure medication. I know the interaction protocols. If you give me that, you are committing medical malpractice." Higgins finally looked at me. She did not see a retired medical professional. She saw a problem. She saw an old black woman who was refusing to be invisible. She sighed and pressed a button under her desk. 2 orderlies appeared at the door. They were big men with bored expressions. "Mrs. Williams is agitated," Higgins said calmly. "She is refusing intake protocol. We need to administer a calmative. You do not have my consent," I snapped, backing away. "I am of sound mind." "Not according to your son," she replied. "He signed the power of attorney for medical decisions. He says you have episodes. This looks like an episode to me." One of the orderlies grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, bruising my skin through my silk blouse. I tried to pull away, but I am 70, not Superman. I felt the sharp sting of a needle in my upper arm before I could even scream. Haldol. I thought analyzing the burn of the liquid entering my muscle, even as my knees began to buckle. "They are using chemical restraints on day 1. They lowered me back into the chair. My tongue felt heavy. The edges of the room began to blur. But my mind, my sharp, stubborn mind, was still recording everything. I looked past Higgins to the hallway outside the open door. I saw a woman in a wheelchair staring at a blank wall, drool drying on her chin because no one had wiped it. I saw a tray of food sitting untouched and cold outside a room. I smelled the bleach trying to cover the rot. This was not a care facility. This was not a place where people came to get better. As the darkness pulled me under, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This was a warehouse. It was a storage unit for human beings that families wanted to forget. They stripped us of our clothes, our medicines, and our dignity, turning us into inventory numbers waiting to expire. My son had not just left me at a nursing home. He had thrown me into a trash can. But as my eyes closed against my will, I held on to one single thought. Trash cans are where people throw things they think are worthless. They have no idea that this particular piece of trash is about to burn their whole world down. I woke up to the sound of screaming. It was not a scream of fear, but a scream of pure, raw need. I blinked, trying to clear the fog the sedative had left in my brain. The ceiling above me was stained with brown watermarks that looked like continents on a map of despair. I tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy, like I was moving through molasses. I looked to my left. In the bed next to mine, a woman who looked like a skeleton wrapped in papery skin was thrashing against the railings. "Hungry," she wailed. "I am so hungry." I recognized the look in her eyes. Dementia. Real dementia, not the convenient lie my son had told to get rid of me. This woman was trapped in a terrifying world where her basic needs were being ignored. I pushed myself up, feeling a strange lightness on my left hand. I looked down. My breath caught in my throat. My ring was gone. My gold wedding band with the 3 small diamonds. The ring Walter had put on my finger 50 years ago. The ring I had never taken off, not when I was scrubbing floors, not when I was delivering babies, not when I buried him. It was gone. I looked around the room frantically. There was no bedside table, just a metal tray. No locker. No secure storage. "Hey!" I called out, my voice raspy. "Hey! Someone come here!" A young nursing assistant walked past the open door, glancing in but not stopping. She wore earbuds and was chewing gum. "My ring!" I shouted. "You stole my ring!" Clara. The woman next to me started screaming louder. "They took it. They take everything!" I forced my legs to move. I stumbled to the door, grabbing the frame for support. The hallway was long and dim, lit by flickering fluorescent tubes. I saw a camera mounted on the ceiling right above the nurse's station. A blinking red light. I narrowed my eyes. 30 years in hospital administration means you know equipment. You know what real security looks like, and you know what cheap intimidation looks like. I walked closer, my legs steadying with every step of anger. I looked up at the camera. The wiring was wrong. It was too thin. And the blinking light was too rhythmic, too perfect. It was a dummy, a fake, a $20 piece of plastic meant to make families feel safe while the staff picked the residents clean like vultures. I looked down the hall. Another camera. Also fake. They were not watching us to keep us safe. They were not watching us at all. This was a lawless zone, a place where a 50-year-old wedding ring could vanish into a pocket and a hungry woman could scream until her throat bled and nobody would ever know. I touched the empty space on my finger. The skin was pale where the gold had been. They thought stealing my ring would break me. They thought stripping me of my last connection to Walter would make me give up. But they forgot one thing. Walter did not live in that ring. He lived in the fire in my belly. And right now that fire was telling me to burn this whole place to the ground. I turned back to Clara, who was still wailing. "Hush now," I said, my voice finding its old command. "I am here, and I am going to get us fed." I walked back into the room not as a patient, but as a general surveying the battlefield. They wanted a crazy old woman. Fine, I would give them a show they would never forget. But first I was going to count every single fake camera in this building. Because when I bought this place, those were the first things that were going into the trash. I was counting the water stains on the ceiling tiles when the service door to the kitchen creaked open. It was 2 p.m, the time when the staff took their smoke breaks by the dumpster, leaving the back entrance unguarded. I knew this because I had been watching their routine for 3 days. I expected a delivery man. Instead, I saw my heart walking through that door. Isaiah. My grandson looked like he had aged 10 years in 72 hours. He was wearing his university hood up, trying to make himself small. When he saw me sitting in that wheelchair by the linen closet, his face crumbled. "Grandma," he whispered, rushing over and dropping to his knees beside me. "They told me you went to Europe. They said you wanted to travel." "Lies," I hissed, gripping his hands. "They are frail hands now, but they still have strength. How did you find me? I tracked your phone location before Dad cut the service. Grandma, you have to come home. You cannot stay here. I am not going anywhere yet," I said, my voice steady. "Not until I am ready." "What are they doing, Isaiah? Tell me the truth." He looked down, biting his lip. He did not want to hurt me. That is the difference between him and his father. "They are having a garage sale," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "Right now. They are selling everything. Your china. Grandpa's record collection. The quilts you made. They are selling your life on the front lawn for pennies, Grandma." I felt a sharp pain in my chest like a knife twisting. My things, my memories, sold to strangers to pay for my son's gambling and my daughter-in-law's vanity. I wanted to scream. I wanted to march out of there and slap the faces of the people I had raised. Isaiah started to stand up. "I am going to stop them. I am going to call the police." "Sit down," I commanded. My voice was low, but it cracked like a whip. "You will do no such thing. If you make a scene, they will cut you off from me. They will say I am incompetent and you are unstable. We cannot win with anger, Isaiah. We have to win with power. But Grandma, they are erasing you. Let them try." I leaned down and reached into my thick compression sock. It was the only hiding place Nurse Ratched had not checked. I pulled out a single $20 bill. It was wrinkled and warm, but it was all I had left in this world. "Take this," I said, pressing it into his palm. "What is this for? I want you to go to the corner store on 4th Street, not the one near the house, the one where nobody knows us. Buy a Powerball ticket." He looked at me like I had finally lost my mind. "A lottery ticket. Grandma, we need a lawyer, not a gamble." "We need a miracle," I snapped. "Play your grandfather's numbers. 4 for the month we met, 12 for the day we married, 19 for the year he was born. You know the rest." He stared at the bill in his hand, then back at me. He saw the fire in my eyes, the same fire that had built a life from nothing once before. "Do not tell your father. Do not tell your mother. This is between us. Now go before Ratched comes back from her cigarette break." He kissed my forehead, tears wetting my cheek. "I love you, Grandma." I watched him slip back out the service door, disappearing into the afternoon light. I was alone again in the hallway that smelled of despair, but as I fingered the empty space in my sock, I felt a strange calm settle over me. My son was selling my past on the front lawn, but he did not know I had just sent my grandson to buy our future. The night of my 70th birthday was silent, except for the snoring of Clara in the bed next to mine. The nurses' station was empty, the staff likely gathered in the break room, watching reality TV and ignoring the reality down the hall. I sat by the window, the moonlight illuminating the bars that were supposed to keep us safe, but really just kept us in. A soft tap on the glass made me jump. I looked out. Isaiah was crouched in the bushes, his face pale in the darkness. He slid the window up just enough to pass a small bundle through the gap. "Here," he whispered. "The phone is fully charged, and the ticket." I took the items, my hands trembling. A cheap burner phone, the kind drug dealers and desperate people use, and a slip of paper with 6 numbers printed in black ink. "Go," I hissed, "before they see you." He vanished into the shadows. I was alone again. I pulled the blanket over my head, creating a tent of darkness. I turned on the phone, the screen glowing blue in the confined space. I tuned the radio app to the local station where the lottery drawing was happening live. The announcer's voice was too cheerful, too loud. I turned the volume down until it was just a murmur against my ear. "And the first number is 4. My breath caught. That was the month Walter and I met. April. The rain had been falling just like it was today. The second number, 12. Our wedding day. I touched the empty space on my finger where my ring used to be. 19. Walter's birth year. The man who had built me a home with his bare hands, the home my son was currently dismantling piece by piece. 31, 42, 7. The last number was the Powerball. 7. The number of children my mother had lost before I was born. The number of years I had waited for a miracle. Every single number matched. I stared at the ticket. $14 million. A scream built in my throat. A scream of victory, of rage, of sheer terrifying joy. I wanted to leap out of bed and run down the hallway shouting that I was free. I wanted to throw this ticket in Nurse Ratcheta's face. But I didn't. I shoved my fist into my mouth and bit down hard on my own knuckles. The pain was sharp and grounding. I bit until I tasted copper. I bit until the scream died in my throat and was replaced by something colder. Silence. If I shouted now, they would medicate me. They would find the ticket. David would find the ticket. And then he would have everything. My house, my dignity, and now my fortune. I looked at the ticket again. This wasn't just money. Money is what you use to buy groceries or pay bills. This was power. This was a weapon. This was a loaded gun pointed directly at the people who had thrown me away. I folded the ticket carefully, my hands suddenly steady. I slipped it inside the lining of my Bible right next to Psalm 23. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." Well, tonight, the Lord had given me a sword. I lay back on the thin mattress, the burner phone hidden under my pillow. I listened to Clara snoring and thought about my son sleeping in my house, likely dreaming about the few $1,000s he would make from selling my furniture. "Sleep well, David," I whispered into the dark, "because when I wake up, I am coming for you, and unlike you, I want to leave anything behind." The shift change at Shady Pines happened exactly at 3:00. For 7 minutes, the hallway cameras were unmonitored while the day shift argued with the night shift about missing narcotics. 7 minutes was all I needed. I moved with a speed that would have stunned my son, who had told the doctors I could barely walk to the bathroom without assistance. I slipped out the service entrance into the alley where the air smelled of wet cardboard and freedom. Isaiah was waiting in his rusted Honda Civic, the engine idling. He looked terrified. I opened the passenger door and threw my walker into the back seat. "Drive," I said. "Drive like the devil himself is chasing us, because if Nurse Higgins catches me out here, he might as well be." We drove 40 minutes to the next county. I had instructed Isaiah to find a corporate attorney who specialized in asset protection, not some strip mall lawyer who would sell my story to the local news. We pulled up to a glass building that looked like it cost more than my entire neighborhood. I walked into that boardroom wearing a stained cardigan and orthopedic shoes, smelling faintly of the nursing home's industrial detergent. Mr. Sterling, the senior partner, looked at me over his spectacles with disdain until I placed the lottery ticket on his mahogany table. "I want to form a blind trust." I told him, my voice steady. "No one knows I won. Not the state, not the public, and especially not my family." He ran the ticket through his verification system. His eyes widened. The disdain vanished, replaced by the sudden respect men always have for $14 million. What should we name the entity? Mrs. Williams. I thought about my life, burned down by my own flesh and blood, left in the ashes of a nursing home to rot. But ashes are where new things begin. Phoenix Rising, LLC, I said, and I want full power of attorney given to this trust immediately. The drive back was a nightmare. Traffic on the interstate had stalled. I watched the clock on the dashboard tick past 4:30. Dinner service started at 5. If I was not in my bed when the orderly brought the tray of gray meatloaf, the alarm would sound. "Step on it, Isaiah," I urged, gripping the dashboard. We skidded into the alley at 4:52. I kissed my grandson's cheek and scrambled out of the car, my joints screaming in protest. I slipped through the heavy steel door just as the kitchen staff was loading the carts. I made it to my room, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I threw the walker into the corner and dove under the thin blanket, pulling it up to my chin, just as the door handle turned. Nurse Higgins marched in holding a clipboard. She looked at the empty chair by the window, then at the lump in the bed. "Sleeping already, Williams?" she sneered, marking something on her paper. "Lazy old bat." She slammed the door shut. Under the covers, I let out a breath I had been holding for 2 hours. She called me lazy. She called me old. But she did not know one thing. She was now standing in a building owned by Phoenix Rising, LLC. I closed my eyes and smiled in the dark. I was not her patient anymore. I was her boss. My son David walked into my room looking like a man marching to the gallows, but his wife Brittany walked in like she owned the hangman's noose. They brought a bouquet of wilting carnations that probably cost $5 at a gas station and a stack of legal documents thick enough to choke a horse. "Hey, Mom," Brittany cooed, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness that makes my teeth ache. "We just came to check on you, and we brought you a little something to sign. Just routine paperwork for your medical file." I looked at the papers. It was a durable power of attorney granting them full control over my assets, my bank accounts, and most importantly, the deed to my house. If I signed this, they could sell my home tomorrow and leave me here until I rotted. I decided it was time to give them a performance worthy of an Academy Award. I let my jaw go slack and stared at a spot just past David's left ear. "Is that you, Walter?" I asked, my voice trembling just enough to sound fragile. "You are late for supper." David flinched. "It is me, Ma. It is David. Dad has been gone for 10 years. I blinked slowly, acting as if the information was taking a long time to process. "David, my baby, did you finish your homework?" Brittany rolled her eyes. She did not see a grieving widow. She saw an obstacle. She shoved the pen into my hand. "Just sign here, Esther, right on the line. Then we can get you some ice cream." She spoke to me like I was a toddler. I took the pen, my hand shaking violently. I brought the tip down to the paper and watched the ink bleed into a messy blob. "Oh dear," I murmured. "I made a mess." "It is fine." Brittany snapped, her patience already fraying. "Just sign next to it." I tried again. I started writing an E, but then I let my hand drift off the page, scribbling onto the bedsheet. "Oops," I said innocently. Brittany grabbed my wrist. Her nails dug into my thin skin. David looked away, the coward. "Focus, Esther," she hissed. "Sign your name. E-S-T-H-E-R." I looked at her with wide, watery eyes. "Who is Esther?" "I am Mrs. Robinson." "The nice lady from church said I could be the choir director. That did it." The mask fell off completely. Brittany slammed her hand down on the tray table, making the water pitcher jump. "Sign the damn paper, you stupid old woman," she screamed. "We do not have time for this senile act. The loan shark gave us until Friday. If we do not have the title to that house by noon tomorrow, they are going to break David's legs." The room went dead silent. David looked at his wife with horror, not because she had threatened his mother, but because she had said the quiet part out loud. I sat there trembling externally, but internally I was smiling a cold, hard smile. Loan sharks, not the bank, not a mortgage. They were in deep with criminals. I dropped the pen. It clattered to the floor. "I want to go home now," I whined, putting my hands over my ears. "The bad lady is yelling. We are leaving." Brittany spat, grabbing her purse. "We will come back tomorrow with a notary who is not so picky. And you better be lucid, old woman, or so help me God, I will pull the plug on you myself." They stormed out, leaving me alone with the wilting carnations. I waited until their footsteps faded down the hall. Then I picked up the pen from the floor and smoothed out the crumpled paper. Loan sharks and a Friday deadline. Brittany had just given me the weapon I needed to destroy her. I was not senile. I was just reloading. Brittany was still screaming about the deadline when she dropped her car keys in her rage. As she bent down to retrieve them from the linoleum floor, the expensive designer bag she had likely bought with my stolen pension money sagged open on the chair next to my bed. It was gaping like a hungry mouth. I had exactly 3 seconds. My hand moved with the precision of a surgeon. I did not shake. I did not hesitate. I palmed the small black square Isaiah had taped under my serving tray earlier that morning. It was a high-fidelity micro-recorder voice activated with a battery life of 48 hours. While Brittany cursed at the floor mats, I leaned over, feigning a coughing fit to cover the sound of the plastic clicking against her makeup bag. I dropped the device deep into the side pocket of her purse, right next to a pack of cigarettes. "There," I whispered in my head. "Take me with you." She stood up, flushed and angry, grabbing the bag. She had no idea she was carrying a wiretap. She stormed out with David trailing behind her like a beaten dog. The next 24 hours were agony. I lay in that hospital bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, imagining what that little black box was hearing. Was it hearing them laugh at me? Was it hearing them spend my money? Isaiah came the next afternoon during visiting hours. He looked pale, his jaw set tight. He sat on the edge of my bed and checked the hallway to ensure Nurse Higgins was not lurking. Then he pulled the small black square from his pocket. "How did you get it?" I asked, keeping my voice low, even though I secretly owned the building now. "I went to the house," he whispered. "I told Mom I needed to find your insurance card for the facility." She left her purse on the kitchen counter while she went to look for it in the study. I grabbed it and ran. "Good boy. Play it." He put an earbud in my ear and pressed play. The audio was crisp. We heard the car door slam, then the engine start, then Brittany's voice clear as a bell and cold as ice. "I cannot believe that old hag is holding out," she spat. "We are screwed, David. I forged her signature on the deed transfer documents, but the notary needs to see her in person to stamp it. If we do not get that stamp by Friday, Vinny is going to take the house in your knees." David's voice was a mumble in the background. "How much do we actually owe him now?" $450,000, Brittany screamed. The car horn honked in the recording. I leveraged the equity in her house to buy into that crypto scheme, and it crashed David. It is gone. Vinny wants his principal plus interest. He said if we do not pay, he takes the title to the historic property. It is the only asset with enough equity to cover the loss. I took the earbud out. My hands were cold. They had not just borrowed money. They had engaged in mortgage fraud. They had forged my signature on a deed and leveraged my home, the home I worked 40 years, to pay off to a loan shark for nearly $500,000. Brittany was not just a bad daughter-in-law, she was a felon, and she was about to lose my house to a criminal enterprise. I looked at Isaiah. He was trembling with rage. "They stole your house, Grandma," he said, his voice cracking. "They forged your name." I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who just realized she held a royal flush. "They did not steal my house, Isaiah," I said calmly. "They just gave me the leverage to buy their souls. Get the lawyer on the phone. I want to know who this Vinny is, and I want to know how much it costs to buy a shark." Mr. Sterling slid the dossier across the polished mahogany table. It was thin, but it held the weight of a guillotine blade. "Here is the situation, Mrs. Williams," he said, adjusting his silk tie. "Your daughter-in-law did not just borrow from a guy named Vinny. She took out a predatory hard money loan against your property through a shell company called Rapid Funding. It is a subprime lender that specializes in distressed assets. And because she has missed the last 3 payments, they are initiating foreclosure proceedings tomorrow morning." I picked up the document. There it was. My address, my home, the place where I had raised my son and nursed my husband. It was listed as collateral on a loan with an interest rate that should have been illegal. Brittany had signed my name with a forgery so clumsy it was almost insulting. "So they are going to take my house?" I asked, my voice calm. "They intend to," Mr. Sterling nodded. "Unless the debt is paid in full immediately." I leaned back in the leather chair. I thought about the $14 million sitting in the Phoenix Rising account. I thought about Brittany screaming at me in the hospital room. I thought about David looking at the floor while his wife threatened his mother. "I do not want to pay the debt," I said. Mr. Sterling looked confused. "But Mrs. Williams, if you do not pay it, you lose the house." I leaned forward. "You are not listening. I do not want to pay it off. I want to buy it." His eyes widened. "You want to buy the note?" "Exactly. I want Phoenix Rising LLC to purchase the non-performing loan from Rapid Funding, offer them full value plus 10% if they transfer the paper to us by close of business today. They are a predatory lender. They do not care about the house. They just want their cash." A slow smile spread across the lawyer's face. He understood. If I paid off the loan, the house was safe, but Brittany and David would be off the hook. But if I bought the loan, I became the lender. I became the shark. "Make the call," I ordered. He picked up the phone. I listened as he negotiated with the shark on the other end. It took 12 minutes. 12 minutes to transfer $450,000. 12 minutes to turn the tables completely. When he hung up, he printed a single sheet of paper. "Assignment of mortgage. Congratulations, Mrs. Williams," he said, handing it to me. "You are now the lien holder. Your son and daughter-in-law no longer owe the bank. They owe you." I took the paper. It felt crisp and heavy. This was better than gold. This was control. Brittany was running around town terrified of a loan shark named Vinny or a bank manager she could not see. She had no idea that the person holding the leash was the old woman sitting in room 4B eating Jell-O. "They have 24 hours before the foreclosure notice is served," I said, standing up. "Do not send it yet. Let them sweat for one more night. Let them think they are losing everything to a stranger." I walked out of that office into the bright sunlight. I pulled out my burner phone and texted Isaiah. "It is done. I was not just a victim anymore. I was not just a mother or a grandmother. I was the bank. And collection day was coming. I sat in the sterile silence of room 4B staring at the screen of the burner phone Isaiah had smuggled in. There it was, my home. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, the wraparound porch where I had rocked my son to sleep, the garden where I had buried 3 family dogs. It was listed on Zillow as a distress sale. The description read, "Investor special cash only. Fast closing required." They had listed it for $300,000 less than it was worth. My blood ran cold, not with fear, but with a rage so pure it felt like ice water in my veins. Brittany had done it. She had found a notary willing to look the other way, forged my signature on a quitclaim deed, and put my life's work on the clearance rack. She was selling my legacy for pennies just to pay off the loan shark she was terrified of. She did not know the shark was me. I dialed Mr. Sterling. My voice was steady, the voice of a woman giving orders in a trauma unit during a code blue. "Buy it," I said. Mr. Sterling paused on the other end of the line. "Mrs. Williams, we hold the note. We can foreclose. We can stop the sale legally by proving fraud." "No," I interrupted. "Fraud takes months to prove in court. Foreclosure gives them time to fight, time to squat, time to strip the copper wiring out of the walls out of spite. I do not want a legal battle. I want a slaughter. Buy the house. Phoenix Rising LLC makes a full cash offer today. Close immediately. Do not negotiate. Give them exactly what they want." I hung up and waited. The notification came through 3 hours later. Offer accepted. The closing was scheduled electronically for the next morning. Just like that, money moved from my left pocket to my right pocket. I had just bought my own house with my own lottery winnings to save it from my own son. That evening they came to visit. The change in their demeanor was sickening. Brittany bounced into the room, her face flushed with the adrenaline of what she thought was a successful heist. David followed, looking relieved, his shoulders finally unhunched. They brought a bakery cake chocolate with expensive shavings, not the dry muffins they usually tossed at me. "We have amazing news," Mom Brittany gushed, slicing the cake with a plastic knife. "We managed to leverage some assets. The financial trouble. It is gone, all taken care of." She was lying through her teeth. She meant she had sold my house, paid off the debt, and was planning to keep the remaining cash for herself. David chimed in, his voice cracking just a little. "Yeah, Ma. We made some moves. We wanted to make sure you were safe here. We even paid your bill for the next 6 months, using my money. They were paying for my prison cell with the equity from my sanctuary." I took the slice of cake. I looked at Brittany. I saw the greed behind her eyes, the smug satisfaction of a predator who thinks the prey is already dead. "You are such good children," I said, forcing a smile that felt like stretching rubber. "I do not know what I would do without you handling my affairs." They beamed. They actually high-fived each other when they thought I was not looking. They thought they had won. They thought they had escaped the debt and cashed out the asset. They had no idea. They did not know that they had just sold the roof over their heads to a shell company owned by the woman sitting in the wheelchair in front of them. They did not know that by selling the house, they had legally severed their only claim to residency. I watched them leave, their laughter echoing down the hall. Go ahead and celebrate, I thought, taking a bite of the expensive chocolate cake. Enjoy the champagne tonight, because tomorrow, Phoenix Rising LLC is serving an eviction notice for squatting on corporate property. You just sold your safety net to the person you pushed off the tightrope. The state inspectors descended on Shady Pines at 6 a.m. like a swarm of angry locusts in navy blue windbreakers. I sat in my wheelchair by the linen closet, sipping lukewarm tea and watching the chaos unfold. I had typed the anonymous report myself on a library computer during my escape 3 days ago. It was not just a complaint, it was a roadmap. I gave them dates. I gave them shift logs. I told them exactly which floor tiles were hiding black mold and which patient charts had been falsified to cover up missed doses. My 30 years as a head nurse administrator meant I knew exactly where the bodies were buried, both literally and metaphorically. I watched Nurse Higgins frantically trying to hide a box of expired medication in her locker, but an inspector caught her. Her face went pale as a sheet. The facility administrator, Mr. Jenkins, was sweating through his cheap suit. I heard him screaming on his cell phone in the hallway. "They are threatening to pull our license. The investors are going to pull out. The valuation is tanking. We need a buyer. We need cash flow now." That was my cue. I rolled into the handicap stall in the visitor's bathroom and dialed Mr. Sterling. "The blood is in the water," I said, my voice echoing against the tile. "The stock price for the parent company just dropped 12%. They are terrified of a negligence lawsuit. Offer them a buyout." Mr. Sterling sounded worried. "Esther, this is a failing business. It is a liability. Why would you want to catch a falling knife?" "No," I corrected him. "It is not a business. It is a stage. And I am buying the theater so I can fire the bad actors. I want 51%. Controlling interest. Do it now while they are desperate." By 4 o'clock, the deal was closed electronically. Phoenix Rising LLC was the new majority owner of Shady Pines Senior Living. I rolled back to room 4B just as Nurse Higgins stormed in. She looked like she had been chewing glass all day. She grabbed my arm roughly to check my vitals, her nails digging into my skin. "You listen to me, Williams," she hissed, leaning close, her breath smelling of stale coffee and cruelty. "The state is here. If you say one word about the food or the meds to those inspectors, I will put you in the solitary wing. Do you understand me?" I looked her dead in the eye. I felt the ghost of a smile on my lips. "I understand perfectly," I said. She stomped out, slamming the door behind her. She thought she was intimidating a senile patient. She had no idea she was threatening the woman who signed her paycheck. I pulled out my little black notebook from under my mattress. I opened it to a fresh page titled Staff Evaluation. Under Nurse Higgins' name, I wrote, "Insubordination, patient abuse, termination pending. I settled back into my pillow. I was not just an inmate anymore. I was the warden, and the review board was now in session. Isaiah walked into my room during the afternoon lull looking like a man who had just watched his own house burn down. He did not say a word. He just sat in the plastic chair next to my bed and put his head in his hands. His shoulders were shaking. "What is it?" I asked, putting my hand on his knee. "Did they find out about the trust?" He looked up and his eyes were red. "It is not the trust, Grandma. It is school. I got an email from the registrar this morning. My tuition check bounced. Bounced. That was impossible. We had set up that college savings account when Isaiah was born. Walter and I had put $500 into it every single month for 18 years. By the time he started law school, there was over $80,000 in there. It was untouchable. Or at least it was supposed to be." I logged into the custodial portal, Isaiah whispered. "The balance is zero. It was withdrawn yesterday in a lump sum transfer. Who authorized it?" He took a shaky breath. "Dad did. He is still the custodian on the account until I turn 25. I called him screaming. Do you know what he said? He said he needed to borrow it. He said Brittany had a sure-thing investment to make back the money they lost on the house. He gave my tuition money to her grandma. He stole my future to pay for her gambling. The rage that filled me was different this time. When they stole my house, I was angry. When they put me in this facility, I was insulted. But this, stealing from a child, stealing the one thing Walter and I had built to ensure our legacy survived. This was war. This was the moment David ceased to be my son and became a casualty. I reached under my pillow and pulled out the burner phone. I opened the banking app for Phoenix Rising LLC. My fingers flew across the screen. "Check your personal checking account." I said, my voice cold as steel. "Not the school account, your private one." Isaiah looked at his phone. His eyes went wide. He dropped the phone on the bed. "Grandma, that is $500,000. That is your tuition," I said. "That is your housing. That is your firm when you graduate. You are done relying on them. You are done needing them." He started to cry again, but this time it was relief. "I am going to go confront him. I am going to tell him he is a thief." "No," I snapped. "You will do no such thing. But he stole from me. I know. And if you confront him now, he will cry and make excuses, and Brittany will find a way to spin it as a misunderstanding. She will say it was a loan. She will say they intended to pay it back." I leaned forward, grabbing his arm. "Listen to me, Isaiah. Silence is a weapon. We need to let the transaction clear. We need to let Brittany spend that money. We need the paper trail to show that funds were moved from a dedicated educational trust directly into a personal account used for debts or luxury goods. That is not borrowing. That is embezzlement. That is grand larceny." I looked him dead in the eye. "If you yell at him today, you get an apology. If you stay quiet for one more week, we get a conviction. Do you understand me?" He wiped his face and nodded slowly. The lawyer in him waking up. "I understand." "Good. Now go back to school, pay your tuition, and act like you are broke. Let them think you are desperate. Let them think they won. Because when the handcuffs click shut, I want the look on their faces to be complete and total surprise." The manila envelope arrived with the morning mail tucked between a flyer for hearing aids and a bill for a life alert system I never ordered. My private investigator Silas was a man of few words, but his results spoke volumes. He had been trailing Brittany for 3 days since she listed my house for that quick cash sale. I took the envelope into the bathroom, the only place in this facility with a lock that actually worked. I sat on the closed lid of the toilet and slid the glossy 8x10 photographs out into the harsh fluorescent light. I expected to see gambling. I expected to see shopping sprees with stolen money. I did not expect this. There was Brittany wearing a red dress I had never seen before, sitting in a dimly lit booth at a steakhouse downtown. Across from her sat a man with slicked back hair and a suit that cost more than my first car. I recognized him immediately. Marcus Thorne, the real estate broker she had hired to handle the distress sale of my home. They were not discussing closing costs. In the first photo, they were clinking champagne glasses. In the second, his hand was covering hers on the white tablecloth. In the third, They were kissing in the parking lot of a motel off the interstate. My stomach turned. It was a visceral physical reaction. My son David was out there right now driving a forklift or begging friends for cash, thinking he was sacrificing his mother to save his marriage. He thought they were a team fighting against a cruel world and a loan shark named Vinny. He had sold his soul to keep a roof over her head. He did not know she was planning to take the cash from the house sale and run away with the realtor. I flipped to the report attached to the photos. Silas had been thorough. He had audio transcripts from a listening device planted in her car. Brittany telling Marcus that David was a loser. Brittany laughing about how easy it was to manipulate him. Brittany discussing how they would split the proceeds 50-50 and leave David with the debt. Part of me, the mother part that remembered rocking David to sleep when he had a fever, wanted to call him right then. I wanted to scream the truth into the phone. I wanted to tell him to run to get out before she destroyed what little was left of him. But the general in me said no. If I told him now, he might not believe me. He was so desperate for her approval, he might accuse me of lying. Or worse, he might confront her, and she would lie her way out of it. She would say it was a moment of weakness comfort during a hard time. She would manipulate him back into submission. No. David needed to see this. He needed to see it when he had nowhere left to turn. He needed to be stripped of his illusions at the exact same moment he was stripped of his assets. I slid the photos back into the envelope. My hands were steady. I felt a cold resolve settling in my chest, displacing the pity I had felt for my son. I was going to let him walk into the trap. I was going to let him stand beside her, thinking they were partners, right up until the moment the floor dropped out. I tucked the envelope under my mattress right next to my Bible. This wasn't just evidence. This was the kill shot, and I was saving it for the grand finale. 2 days later, Brittany stormed into room 4B, not with a lawyer or a doctor, but with a tripod and a ring light. She was followed by David, who was carrying a grocery store sheet cake that looked like it had been dropped in the parking lot. It was time for the performance of her life. "We are going live in 5 minutes," she announced, setting up her phone on the tripod. "I need you to look sad, Esther. Look pathetic. We are launching a GoFundMe to help with your medical bills since the insurance is being difficult." She meant since she had stolen all the money and needed a new source of income. She arranged the pillows behind me to make me look smaller, frailer. She even messed up my hair, pulling a few strands loose, so I would look more like the confused dementia patient she had invented. "Just nod and smile," she whispered, leaning in close, her voice low and dangerous. "And if you are good and sign the transfer for the retirement fund later, I will let you have a piece of cake." I looked at the cake. It was vanilla with cheap waxy frosting. I hate vanilla. Brittany hit the record button and her face instantly transformed. The scowl vanished, replaced by a teary-eyed, tragic smile. She looked into the camera lens like it was a lover. "Hi, everyone," she said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. "I am here with my sweet mother-in-law, Esther. We are celebrating her 70th birthday a little late because things have just been so hard lately. Her care is so expensive, and we are doing everything we can to keep her comfortable, but we really need your help." She reached out and held my hand. Her palm was sweaty. David stood in the background looking at his shoes, trying to disappear into the wall paint. "Please donate to the link in my bio," she continued, squeezing my hand hard enough to hurt. "Every dollar helps us keep a roof over this sweet woman's head." I looked at the phone screen, seeing the comments rolling in. "Poor thing. You are a saint, Brittany. Prayers for the family." Then I looked at Brittany, really looked at her. She was wearing a new designer handbag slung over her shoulder. It was cream-colored leather with gold hardware, a Chanel. It cost at least $5,000. I remembered waking up that first morning with my finger bare. I remembered the empty feeling where my wedding band had been for 50 years. I sat up straighter. I pulled my hand away from hers. "Brittany," I said, my voice clear and loud. She looked at me, panic flickering in her eyes. "Mom, say hi to the camera." I looked directly into the lens. I did not blink. "That is a beautiful purse, Brittany," I said. "Is that the one you bought with the money you got from pawning my wedding ring?" The room went dead silent. The comments on the screen stopped for a split second and then exploded. Brittany's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a hook, her face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of paste. What she stammered. "Mom, you are confused?" "No, dear," I continued, leaning forward. "My gold band, the one with the 3 diamonds Walter gave me in 1974. You took it off my finger while I was medicated." "Did the pawn shop give you enough for the matching wallet too, or just the bag?" David made a noise like he had been punched in the gut. Brittany lunged for the phone, knocking the ring light over with a crash. The stream cut to black, but it was too late. The internet is forever, and I had just turned her pity party into a crime scene. Mr. Jenkins stood at the foot of my bed, vibrating with the nervous energy of a man who knows his job hangs by a thread. The administrator, who used to ignore my calls for fresh water, was now taking dictation like a secretary. I told him exactly what to write in the subject line of the email. Urgent family conference regarding Esther Williams. Critical decline. It was the bait they had been salivating for since the day they dropped me off. "Send it," I said, "and make sure you copy their lawyer. I want everyone present." I imagined Brittany reading that notification on her stolen iPhone. She probably skipped lunch to go shopping for a black dress, something tasteful enough for a funeral, but tight enough to flirt with the probate judge. They did not see a tragedy. They saw a payday. They saw the final obstacle between them and my assets flatlining. They arrived on Tuesday morning. I watched them from the window of the conference room on the 4th floor. They did not look sad. They looked like they were suppressing a cheer. Brittany was wearing pearls, as if she were the grieving daughter-in-law in a Lifetime movie. David wore a suit that was too big for him, shrinking under the weight of his own guilt, or perhaps just the hangover. But they were not alone. Walking behind them was a man with a briefcase and a predatory grin, a lawyer, not a high-end corporate attorney like Mr. Sterling. This was a bottom feeder, someone they had likely found on a billboard next to a bail bondsman. They had brought legal counsel to a deathbed. They were not coming to say goodbye. They were coming to secure the loot before the body was even cold. I rolled my wheelchair to the head of the long mahogany table. I had set the stage perfectly. The lights were dimmed. I sat with my head bowed, a heavy wool blanket over my lap, hiding my legs. I looked small. I looked defeated. I looked exactly like the victim they wanted me to be. Isaiah stood in the back corner, hidden by the shadows. He held the briefcase containing the evidence of their destruction. He gave me a small nod. The door opened. The air in the room changed instantly, souring with the scent of Brittany S. expensive perfume and David S. fear sweat. "Oh, Mom." Brittany sighed, rushing over, but stopping a safe 3 feet away, as if poverty were contagious. "We got here as fast as we could. Mr. Jenkins said it was time." She looked at the lawyer, then back at me. "Since you are not fully yourself right now," she continued, pulling a document from the lawyer's hands, "we brought Mr. Groden to help facilitate the transition. We just need you to sign over the final medical directive and the estate management rights. It will make everything easier for David when you pass." "Easier," David echoed, his voice hollow. "Yeah, easier." I did not move. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable, until the lawyer shifted his weight and checked his watch. They thought they were vultures circling a carcass. They did not realize they had just walked into the lioness den, and I was about to lock the door behind them. The air in the VIP conference room smelled of lemon polish and expensive leather. It was the kind of room where fortunes were decided, not where old women were sent to be forgotten. I sat at the head of the massive mahogany table, slumped deep into my wheelchair. My chin was buried in my chest, and a heavy gray wool blanket covered my legs, completely hiding the fact that I was wearing my best Italian slacks and not the humiliating hospital gown they expected. I heard them before I saw them. The click of Brittany's heels against the hardwood floor echoed like gunshots in the silence. She walked in first because of course she did. She was not looking at me with concern or pity. She was scanning the room, assessing the furniture, probably calculating how much she could get for the antique sideboard on Facebook Marketplace. David followed her, trailing a few steps behind like a well-trained pet. He was clutching his hat in his hands, looking everywhere except at his mother. And behind them came Mr. Groden, their lawyer, a man whose suit fit too tightly and whose smile looked like it had been bought at a discount dealership. "Well," Brittany said, dropping her designer bag onto the polished table with a heavy thud. "Let us get this over with. We have a dinner reservation at 6, and I do not intend to be late." She looked at Mr. Jenkins, the administrator who was standing by the door with his arms crossed. Is she lucid? Does she know what she is signing? Because frankly, we do not have time for another one of her dramatic episodes. Mr. Jenkins did not answer. He just looked at me. Grodin opened his briefcase, snapping the latches open loud and sharp. Mrs. Williams, he boomed, using that patronizing volume, people reserved for the deaf or the stupid. We have the final conservatorship papers here. Your son simply wants to protect your remaining assets. It is for your own good. You just need to sign right here. We will guide your hand if you are too weak. I let out a long, shaky breath. I waited for the silence to fill the room. I waited until Brittany tapped her manicured nails on the wood, impatient and annoyed. Then I slowly lifted my head. I looked straight at Brittany. I did not blink. I did not tremble. My eyes were clear, sharp, and burning with a fire she had never seen before. The tapping stopped. Brittany frowned, confusion rippling across her face. David looked up, and for the first time, he saw me, really saw me. He took a small step back. I gripped the armrests of the wheelchair, not for support, but for leverage. I stood up. It happened in slow motion for them, but for me it was the release of a spring that had been coiled for months. I kicked the heavy wool blanket aside. I stood to my full height, my spine straight, my shoulders back. I was not a frail patient. I was the matriarch. David gasped. A strangled sound escaped his throat. Brittany's jaw unhinged her mouth, forming a perfect circle of shock. The lawyer froze his pen, hovering over the paper. I picked up the thick blue folder Isaiah had placed next to me. I walked down the length of the table. My steps were firm, steady, and commanding. I stopped right in front of Brittany. I could smell her fear rising above her perfume. I threw the folder down. It hit the wood with a thunderous clap that made them all jump in their skins. "You can put your pen away, counselor," I said, my voice filling the room without shouting. "And you can cancel your dinner reservation, Brittany. You are not going to be eating tonight. You are going to be vomiting." I leaned in close until I saw my own reflection in her terrified eyes. The game is over. Isaiah hit the button on the remote, and the large screen behind me flickered to life. The room dimmed, casting a cold blue light over Brittany's face. The first image was a document blown up to the size of a movie poster. It was the loan agreement with Rapid Funding, the predatory lender Brittany had used to mortgage my future. Her signature was at the bottom, a forgery so bold it was almost impressive. "Do you recognize this?" I asked, pointing a steady finger at the screen. Brittany squinted, her arrogance faltering for the first time. "That is private financial information. How did you get that?" "I got it because I bought it," I said calmly. "When you defaulted last week, the bank was preparing to foreclose, but my company, Phoenix Rising LLC, stepped in and purchased the debt." I leaned forward, resting my hands on the table. "I am not just your mother-in-law right now, Brittany. I am your creditor. You owe me $450,000, and unlike the bank, I do not offer payment plans. I want it all, today." David made a small whimpering sound like a kicked puppy. Brittany shook her head, her blonde hair flying. "That is impossible. You are broke. We sold the house. We used the money to pay off the debt. We are clear." Isaiah clicked the remote again. The screen changed. It was the deed to my house in the historic district. The transfer stamp was dated 3 days ago. "You did sell the house." I agreed. "You sold it for cash to an anonymous investor who closed in 24 hours. I pointed to the line listing the buyer. "Phoenix Rising LLC." "You sold my house to me," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that screamed. "You sold my memories, my sanctuary, and the roof over your own head back to the very woman you tried to evict. I own the deed, Brittany." "Which means you are trespassing in my home." "No," Brittany screamed. She stood up, knocking her chair over. Her face was a mask of twisted rage. "This is a trick. You are lying. You are a senile old woman who wets the bed. You do not own anything. You are rotting in a state facility because we put you there." Isaiah clicked the remote one last time. The final document appeared. It was the certificate of ownership for Shady Pines Senior Living. Actually, I said I own the bed I wet too. I bought the controlling interest in this facility last week. I fired the board. I rewrote the protocols, and I authorized the security team to record every single word you have said in this room. You are standing on my floor, Brittany. You are breathing my air, and you are finished." Brittany let out a primal shriek, a sound of pure denial. She lunged across the table, her hands clawed, reaching for my throat. She wanted to tear the truth out of me. She wanted to silence the woman she thought she had buried. But I did not flinch. I did not move, because I knew exactly who was waiting behind the door to catch her. 2 large security guards stepped out from the shadows behind me, blocking Brittany before she could reach my wheelchair. But I did not need them. I had something far more damaging than physical force. I turned my eyes to David. He was trembling, his face pale and sweaty, staring at his wife like he was trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. "She did it for us," he whispered, his voice cracking. "We had to survive, Ma. We were drowning." "Survive." I repeated the word, tasting the bitterness of it. "Is that what you call it, David? Is that what you call a $300 steak dinner with the real estate agent who listed my house?" I nodded to Isaiah. The screen behind me changed one more time. The photos were crisp and undeniable. Brittany in the red dress, Brittany laughing with her head thrown back, Brittany kissing Marcus Thorne, the real estate broker, in the parking lot of the steakhouse. The timestamp was 48 hours ago, the exact same night David had called me begging for money to keep the lights on. David made a sound that was not human. It was the sound of a man watching his entire reality shatter into dust. He looked at Brittany, his eyes wide and pleading. "Tell me it is not true," he begged. "Tell me it is Photoshop." Brittany did not answer. She just crossed her arms and looked away, her face twisted in a sneer of pure contempt. "She was selling you out, son," I said, my voice soft but unyielding. "You sold your mother to save your marriage, but she was selling your marriage for a commission check. She was planning to take the cash from the house sale and leave you with the debt." David collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He sobbed loud, heaving cries that echoed off the mahogany walls. It was pathetic. It was heartbreaking. And I felt absolutely nothing. "Do not cry yet," I said sharply. "You do not get to be the victim here. You are not a victim, David. You are a thief." I threw the last document onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right in front of his tear-stained face. It was the bank transfer record for Isaiah's college trust fund. "You emptied your own son's future," I said, pointing a finger at him. $80,000. Money. Walter and I saved for 18 years. You stole it yesterday. You told Isaiah it was a loan, but we traced the transfer. It went straight into a joint account with Brittany, and then straight to an offshore gambling site. David looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. "I was going to put it back," he stammered. "I just needed to win it back." That is when Isaiah stepped out from the shadows. He walked to the front of the room. He was not wearing his hoodie today. He was wearing a suit I had bought him with my winnings. He looked tall, he looked strong. He looked like the man his father should have been. He placed a briefcase on the table. "You are not putting anything back," Dad Isaiah said, his voice steady and cold. "Because I'm not waiting for you to fix this. I am the legal representative for Phoenix Rising LLC, and I am also the plaintiff in a civil suit against you both for embezzlement fraud and breach of fiduciary duty." Isaiah looked at his father, then at his mother. "You are not my parents anymore," he said. "You are defendants, and I suggest you stop talking because the police are waiting in the hallway." The door burst open, and 3 officers in dark uniforms marched in their footsteps, heavy and loud on the carpet. They were not the polite neighborhood patrol. These were Economic Crimes Unit officers, and they carried themselves with the grim efficiency of men who hunt white-collar criminals for a living. "Brittany Miller," one officer announced, stepping towards her. "You are under arrest for mortgage fraud, grand larceny, and identity theft. We have a warrant for your arrest based on evidence of forged signatures and fraudulent loan applications totaling $450,000. Brittany scrambled backwards, her heels slipping on the polished floor. "No!" She shrieked, her voice high and frantic. "This is a mistake. I am a victim here. My mother-in-law is crazy." She set me up. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back," the officer said, his tone bored. She fought them. She actually tried to slap the handcuffs away, her nails scratching at the officer's arm. It took two of them to restrain her, pinning her against the mahogany wall. As the metal clicked shut around her wrists, she looked at me, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. "I will sue you," she screamed. "I will take everything you have, you old witch." "You already tried," I said calmly, watching her struggle. "And look where it got you." The third officer walked over to David. He was still sitting in his chair, his head in his hands. He did not fight. He did not scream. He just looked up, his face wet with tears, his expression one of total defeat. "David Williams," the officer said, pulling him up by his arm, "you are under arrest for embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty regarding the misappropriation of trust funds." David looked at Isaiah. "Son, please. I am your father." Isaiah did not flinch. He did not look away. "You were my father when you stole my tuition money," he said. "Now you are just a thief." They dragged them out of the room. Brittany was still screaming, cursing my name, cursing David, cursing the world. David was silent, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped. I watched them go. I watched the son. I had raised the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man I had nursed through a divorce and a bankruptcy, be led away in handcuffs. I waited for the pain. I waited for the motherly instinct to kick in, the urge to run after them, to beg the officers to be gentle to pay their bail. But it never came. Instead, I felt a strange hollowness, a quiet, empty space where my love for him used to be. He had made his choice. He had chosen a gambling addiction and a greedy wife over his own mother. He had chosen to throw me away like trash to fund his own destruction. "Consequences," I whispered to the empty room. "They say a mother's love is unconditional. Maybe it is, but a mother's respect has to be earned. And David had spent 40 years spending mine until the account was overdrawn." "You chose money instead of me, son," I said to the closing door. "Now you do not have either." I turned to Isaiah. He was standing by the window watching the police cars flash their lights in the parking lot below. He looked tired, but he looked free. "Come here," I said, opening my arms. He walked over and hugged me, burying his face in my shoulder like he was a little boy again. I held him tight, feeling the strength in his back, the steady beat of his heart. "It is over, Grandma," he said. "No," I corrected him, looking out at the bright future waiting for us. "It is just beginning." 6 months have passed since the day the handcuffs clicked shut around my son's wrists. The morning sun is shining bright over the Atlantic Ocean, warming the terrace of the seaside villa I bought with cash 2 weeks after the trial. I am not wearing a stained cardigan or orthopedic shoes anymore. I am wearing a silk caftan that catches the breeze and gold sandals that show off a perfect pedicure. But today, I am not at the beach. I am standing in front of a building that used to be my prison. The peeling gray paint of shady pines is gone, replaced by warm, inviting stucco. The dead lawn where they threw my suitcase is now a lush garden filled with blooming hydrangeas and comfortable benches. The sign out front has changed too. It is carved in solid oak and reads, "The Esther Foundation." It is no longer a warehouse for the unwanted. It is a sanctuary. Under my ownership, every single bed is free for low-income seniors who have been abandoned or mistreated by their families. I fired Nurse Higgins and her entire crew on my first official day as owner. I replaced them with staff who are paid double the market rate to treat people with dignity instead of drugs. I walk through the garden watching residents play cards and drink fresh lemonade. They are safe here. They are respected here. And most importantly, they are listened to here. Isaiah stands beside me looking sharp in a navy blue suit. He is not just my grandson anymore. He is the director of legal affairs for the foundation. He finished his law degree at the top of his class thanks to the tuition I restored and the peace of mind that comes from knowing his future is secure. He hands me a glass of sparkling cider and smiles the same smile his grandfather used to have. "To new beginnings, Grandma," he says, raising his glass. "To justice," I correct him, clinking my glass against his. We do not talk about David much these days. He sends letters from the correctional facility every week, begging for money for the commissary or asking for a visit. I burn them unopened in my marble fireplace. Brittany is awaiting trial in a state facility wearing orange jumpsuits instead of the Chanel she bought with my wedding ring money. They wanted a life of leisure funded by my hard work. Now they have plenty of time to think about their choices while I spend my fortune making sure no other mother has to feel the cold sting of abandonment. I look at the thriving community I built from the ashes of their betrayal. People say blood is thicker than water, but I say respect is the only currency that matters. I rewrote my will this morning in front of 3 witnesses and a notary. Every single penny of my estate, my properties, my investments, and the foundation goes to Isaiah. David gets nothing. Not a house, not a dime, not even my pity. I stripped my own son of his inheritance to give it to the grandson who saved my life. Some people might call that cold. I call it consequences. So that is my story. I would love to hear what you think. Did I go too far by leaving my son with absolutely nothing, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more stories like mine. Life teaches us the hardest lessons when we least expect them. The biggest mistake I made was not trusting my son. It was believing that shared blood guarantees loyalty. It does not. For years I confused enabling with loving, thinking that if I just gave enough, they would eventually respect me. But predators do not respect the hand that feeds them. They only look for the moment to bite. My story is a reminder that dignity has no expiration date. They thought because I was 70 I was finished. They mistook my silence for senility and my patience for weakness. But wisdom is a weapon far sharper than greed. To all the mothers and grandmothers listening, never hand over the keys to your kingdom until you are certain the hands receiving them are clean. You work too hard to build your life to let someone dismantle it for spare parts. Protecting yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the storm they created without offering them your umbrella. If you believe respect must be earned, hit that like button and share this video. Subscribe to the Never Too Old channel for more stories of justice and strength.